Good morning, everyone. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Welcome to meeting number 36 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Agriculture and Agri-Food. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the standing orders. Members are attending in person in the room and remotely using the Zoom application. Before I continue, I'd like to ask all in-person participants to consult the guidelines written on the cards on the table. These measures are in place to help prevent audio and feedback incidents and protect the health and safety of all participants, including our interpreters. You'll also notice a QR code on the card which links to a short awareness video. I'd like to take a few moments to comment on for the benefit of witnesses and members. Please wait until I recognize you by name or ask a question, or you're asked a question directly by members before speaking. For those participating by video conference, click on the microphone icon to activate your mic, and please mute yourself when you are not speaking. For those on Zoom, at the bottom of your screen, you can use the selection. You can select the appropriate channel for interpretation, either Floor, English, or French. For those in the room, you can use the earpiece and select the desired channels. I'd like to remind witnesses that committee members may ask questions in either French or English. If you need interpretation, please take a moment now to prepare your earpiece and select the listing channel you need in advance in order to take full advantage of the time allotted for questions and answers. A reminder that all comments should be addressed through the chair. For members in the room, if you wish to speak, please raise your hand. For members on Zoom, please use the raise hand function. The clerk and I will manage the speaking order as best we can, and we appreciate your patience and understanding in this regard. Pursuant to the Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted by the committee on Thursday, September 18, 2025, the committee is resuming its study of business risk management programs in Canada's agriculture sector. I'd like to welcome our witnesses for joining us here today. Thank you for taking time to be here. We have Sarah Deslille from the Conseil pour le Développement de l'Agriculture du Québec, from MNP LLP, Marvin Slingerland, Vice President, and Akul Jot Singh Gill, Director, who's a Director, and also from the Ontario Federation of Agriculture, Ben Lefort, who's a Senior Economist. You have up to 5 minutes for speaking, and then we'll go into questions. So maybe we'll start with members from MNP LLP. You have 5 minutes.
Good morning, Chair and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today to speak about the committee's study on Canada's business risk management programs. My name is Marvin Slingerland, and alongside me is AJ Gill, and we are pleased to be here on behalf of MNP, one of Canada's largest advisors to the Canada's agriculture sector. MNP has served as a trusted advisor to agriculture operations since their founding in Brandon, Manitoba. Over the past 68 years, MNP has built a comprehensive agriculture practice where today we work directly with over 30,000 clients across Canada, and we serve these clients across our 178 offices coast to coast. This work includes supporting producers each year in navigating BRM programs, filing thousands of applications, and managing risk at the farm level. Over the years, we have developed a deep understanding of what is working well within Canada's BRM framework and where targeted reforms are needed. This understanding has been documented in a paper outlining our observations and recommendations moving forward, which we're happy to provide the committee with. Let me begin with a fundamental point. Canada's BRM programs remain a cornerstone of agriculture policy, designed to support producers facing income volatility from external shocks. In our view, the core architecture of the system is sound, with the programs playing a critical role in supporting the long-term viability of farm operations across the country. Further, this strength lies in its margin-based foundation, particularly through AgriStability, creating an effective and responsive tool for producers. However, what we have heard from producers, along with our advisors, is that the system has not kept pace with the realities of modern agriculture, and that is where reform is needed. Producers frequently experience long processing timelines, sometimes receiving payments well beyond the point when they are useful for cash flow. There is also limited visibility into how payments are calculated, which creates uncertainty and contributes to the perception of the program as a black box. More importantly, the sector has evolved. Farm operations have become larger, more capital intensive, and more complex. Yet key program parameters have not kept pace, reducing the effectiveness of support in some cases. In short, while the intent of the programs remains strong, their practical effectiveness have been constrained by outdated parameters and delivery challenges.
Good morning. This leads us to our recommendation, how to improve Canada's BRM suite. Our recommendations focus on strengthening, not replacing the existing systems that we have in place. At high level, we recommend, first, maintaining a strong margin-based core program with agri-stability remaining central to the BRM suite. Second, modernize program delivery, including improving administrative efficiencies and accelerating payments. Thirdly, strengthening transparency and communication so producers better understand the program rules and outcomes and the policy intent. Fourth, ensuring greater policy stability, moving beyond short-term adjustments to provide multi-year certainty. And lastly, and expanding financial literacy support so producers can fully understand and utilize available tools. Taken together, these reforms are aimed to restoring producers' confidence, improving program uptake, and ensuring that public investments are delivering meaningful impact. To conclude, Canada's BRM programs are at a critical juncture. Producers are facing increased volatility driven by market uncertainty, climate pressures, and rising costs. With targeted, evidence-based reforms, Canada can ensure its BRM systems continue to support a resilient, competitive, and sustainable agriculture sector for years to come. Thank you again for your opportunity to appear. We'll be pleased to answer any of your questions.
Thank you very much. Next, we'll go to the Conseil pour le développement de l'agriculture de Québec for 5 minutes.
Hello, Mr. Chair, ladies and gentlemen, members of the committee. First of all, I'd like to thank you for the invitation to the Quebec Council for Agricultural Development to participate in your deliberations, and I will give you a brief introduction of our organization. Founded in 1996 at the request of the Canadian government to address the end of the financial assistance for transporting grain from the west to the east, the CDAQ is a nonprofit organization that has been supporting the agricultural sector for 30 years. Between 1996 and 2016, the CDAQ implemented more than 20 federal programs and monitored 4,000 projects, thereby making a major contribution to the productivity of Quebec's agricultural businesses, the implementation of sustainable agriculture, and research and marketing of agricultural products. However, in 2017, the CDAQ refocused its efforts and is now directly involved in the fight against climate change in agriculture. Best known for its flagship project, AgriClimat, the CDAQ has developed cutting-edge expertise to address the two key aspects of combating climate change, that is, climate risk analysis and the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions on farms. Since 2026, the CDAQ team has been leading and supporting more than 20 projects to assist with the implementation of on-farm measures and innovations aimed specifically at the adoptability of practices, thereby generating $3 million in revenue. I would also like to mention that one of the unique strengths of the CDAQ benefits from in Quebec is the presence of two major driving forces within the agricultural sector, the UPA's regional federations and their affiliated specialized production groups, as well as VIA, Pôle d'expertise en services conseil agricole, Agricultural Advisory Services and Expertise Hub, a provincial organization offering non-input related services, particularly in agro-environmental consulting. Since 2017, the CDAQ has conducted in-depth work on identifying the risks and opportunities arising from climate change with agricultural producers from all regions and major production sectors, as well as with advisors and researchers. More than 100 discussion meetings have guided the CDAQ toward the importance of facilitating the adoption of practices through collective projects, and toward the development of an integrated approach for the benefit of producers, the Farm Climate Plan. The Climate Plan allows producers to access climate information specific to the exact location of their farm, notably through close collaboration between the CDAQ and Uranos. With the support of an advisor certified in this tool, producers analyze the risks for their farms may face and prioritize the measures to be implemented. Next, their carbon footprint is calculated using a method that accounts for greenhouse gas emissions for a given year, as well as the carbon sequestered in their soils and agroforestry systems. The producer evaluates the levers for reducing their carbon footprint through actions specific to their farm. They receive a comprehensive action plan tailored to their operation that enables them to combat climate change. Some data from CDAC's work. Raising awareness among more than 7,000 producers through the Agri-Climat project, major contribution to the Racines d'Avenir and the Les Carboneutres Living Laboratories project, rollout of Agri-Solutions Climat, development of the on-farm climate plan and the Agri-Climat platform, support for 80 certified agricultural advisors to develop on-farm climate plans, ongoing innovation projects, dairy, beef, sheep, egg, cranberry, strawberry, and raspberry production, processing vegetables, field crops, forage crops, and more. Agri-Climat network, over 500 producers and stakeholders sharing a common interest in accelerating the fight against climate change. Agricultural training on combating climate change in cattle, swine, and forage production. Based on nearly 10 years of developing and implementing projects to combat climate change, the CDAC has two overarching observations. Agricultural producers are more concerned with measures to adapt to climate change than with those focused solely on reducing greenhouse gas emissions, particularly due to the economic factors, the sustainability of their business, and the resulting co-benefits. And the factors facilitating climate adaptation are access to cutting-edge agronomic support, the presence of a knowledge transfer network, participation in collective projects, and financial assistance allocated for the adoption of practices, all provided the business is in a favorable position financially in terms of human resources and structurally. Given the quality of past discussions regarding risk management programs and the work of the CDAC, I propose that we focus our discussion on the measures to be implemented prior to these programs. Thank you.
Very much. Next, we'll go to the Ontario Federation of Agriculture for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. Thank you for the invitation to address the study on business risk management programs in Canada's agricultural sector. My name is Ben Lafort. I am the senior economist for the Ontario Federation of Agriculture. OFA proudly represents more than 38,000 farm family members across Ontario. Our members produce over 200 commodities, and OFA advocates for an agri-food sector that drives over $50 billion in provincial GDP and sustains over 750,000 jobs. The primary message we bring to the committee today is that the risks Canadian farmers face have increased dramatically in both the severity of the risks and the types of risks that they face, and that these risks are unlikely to go away anytime soon, which means that we need new investments in our risk management programs to help farmers navigate these increased risks. Historically, agricultural risk was viewed through a more narrow lens of more episodic, isolated events. Today, producers are now battling the compounding impacts of climate change, where severe weather events are much more routine rather than rare. Farmers are highly exposed to uncertain trade policies, restricted market access, increased volatility in geopolitical shocks, and because agriculture is a deeply interconnected global industry, any international stability, whether it's the Russian invasion of Ukraine or the conflict in Iran, always hits agricultural sector. We are living through this right now, navigating through energy and fertilizer price spikes. And when you combine these elevated input costs with elevated interest rates and mounting farm debt loads, the result is a squeeze on producer margins. Farmers are price takers. They have no ability to pass on these costs along to the consumer. Every single external shock is a direct hit to farm profitability. Our latest Farm Business Confidence Survey paints a stark picture of this reality. When we look at the producers who rank improving risk management programs as a top policy priority, their economic outlook is overwhelmingly categorized as not so confident. The compounding risks that they face have frozen investment, with the majority of respondents telling us their growth plans are simply to maintain the status quo rather than expand their operation. They tell us every day that they are being weighed down by rising input costs, escalating insurance premiums, heavy tax burdens, and commodity price volatility. The modern risk environment and the margin squeeze that farmers face requires enhanced public investment. In light of the financial squeeze farmers face, further investments on key risk management programs such as agri-stability are necessary for farmers to have confidence to make further investments in their business and help the sector and the country reach its full economic potential. While we applaud many of the recent improvements to the agri-stability program, such as the removal of the reference margin limitation provision and increased compensation rates, we hear consistently from our members that their number one priority within that program is to restore the payment trigger of the agri-stability program to 85% of historical reference margins. Furthermore, we greatly appreciate the government's flexibility in adjusting the interest-free limit under the advanced payment program over the past number of years. However, as we all know, the geopolitical risks and the increasing input costs farmers face are likely a permanent new reality. And that is why OFA continues to advocate to change the program guidelines to permanently increase the interest-free portion of the advanced payments program to $350,000. To truly help farmers navigate this period of uncertainty and financial pressure requires a whole-of-government approach that links policy tools across the entire government of Canada, not simply just within one ministry or department. The Canadian agri-food system, encompassing both primary agriculture and value-added food processing, is an undeniable economic powerhouse for Canada. It contributes over $150 billion to our national GDP and helps sustain over 2.3 million jobs. In fact, food processing now stands as Canada's largest manufacturing sector by both GDP and employment. As we approach the next policy framework, we ask that the government recognize the agri-food as a core strategic industry of national importance to our economy. By supplementing increased MPF funding with further infrastructure programming to help get agri-food goods to market, growth-oriented tax policies, and focus on expanding our domestic processing capacity to ensure we value add our raw commodities here at home and insulating Canadian farmers from international volatility and securing Canada's food sovereignty. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much. Perfect timing. We'll go to the Conservatives for 6 minutes. Mr. Epp.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the witnesses for being here today. I'll begin with a short question and a quick response, please. The present APF has got 5 pillars. Obviously, this study deals with BR business risk management. The last APF introduced the concept of cross-compliance between one of the elements of BRM and to other programming in the other pillars. I'll start with the OFA. Have your members been lobbying you for increased cross-compliance in the next APF? Mr. Laforte, please.
Thank you for the question. No, that is not an issue our members have wanted us to pursue. In fact, the opposite. We have heard feedback of on the cross-compliance issue of linking Agri-Invest to an agri-risk assessment, that is, in our members' view, an unnecessary step. And any additional cross-compliance in that way would not be viewed positively, more as another difficulty in red tape accessing the programs.
Thank you. To the clients of MNP, similar question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Our comments would be similar. If the number one goal of the program is to get people enrolled in the BRM suite of programs, cross-compliance just further adds a complication to enrollment. So I would say let's keep it easy to enroll and address other issues via other means.
Thank you. In your testimony, Mr. Laforte, you referenced that the risks were climbing, and you're not the first witness that's come to this committee identifying that as agriculture and agri-food processing goes forward. With that, and with the BRM programs being cost-shared, the logic outcome of that is increased costs, both for producers and for governments. And we heard testimony today that agri-stability, the margin-based program, should remain front and center as a way to address, increased volatility, in particular in costs. It'll come as a surprise to no one. I'm going to introduce the concept of reinsurance as a potential tool going forward to address both the volatility, especially the volatility, and increased costs going forward. Any comments, Mr. Laforte?
Well, we are certainly, our membership are certainly open to any additional tools outside the core program to reduce risk, reduce costs to these programs while increasing the efficiency of them. They do maintain that those further investments in the core programs are critical, though. And you're right to raise that the increased risk that the industry faces are an additional cost to the industry and potential increased spending through both levels of government as they are cost-shared program. Anything we can do to support producers while reducing the cost is certainly worth looking into, absolutely. But we would maintain those increased costs within the program are a worthwhile investment given the magnitude of the economic impact that the entire sector has on the Ontario and federal economy. Thank you.
Thank you. MNP, same question.
There's over 300 published commodities in Canada, and we believe that AgriStability is the best program to react to whether it's drop in revenue, increase in production costs, or a loss of production. We've seen AgriStability help clients when it comes to whether it's trade issues, whether it comes to avian influenza, whether it comes to floods in BC or widespread drought in the prairies. Our opinion is that it reacts fairly for a widespread of perils. We have seen issues with reinsurance in some regions where there's been programs rolled out, and after a year, programs have disappeared due to the cost of reinsurance via private insurance companies. AgriStability provides a long-term solution for producers with stability.
Thank you. I'll stay with NMP and on AgriStability for the moment. In your testimony, you said it is the core program, needs to be going forward, and needs to remain so going forward. And yet, over time, the participation has gone down and down and down, and you addressed some of those concerns. Let me go to the concept of kind of a national framework of AgStability as a plug-and-play model where regional programs plug into it, and either producers have more choice, be it private or be it public, and then if they choose to participate, the costs and revenues from those other programs are either taken into account or imputed in a national framework. Obviously, for reinsurance to work in that program, the program would have to be morphed into an insurance type of program as opposed to a purely margin-based government virtually only cost responsive program. Can you comment?
I would say that there's a room for the reinsurance programs to play, obviously, but they cannot be the main sector. The rationale behind it is just the number of different commodities and that we can protect through the AgriStability program. That is just not feasible through the insurance programs or the crop.
Separate reinsurance from agri-insurance. The reinsurance operates in the background. It is not a.
So when you say reinsurance, you mean through private insurance, or you're talking about the whole farm insurance of the federal government?
Just like the agri-insurance programs at the provincial level are using reinsurance, there's the possibility of that being used on national, federally and provincially delivered programs in the background, not client facing.
So two things. Sorry. Two concerns with that. One is the coverage level obviously decreases because your perils are going to be covered that are going to be right on the farm, where the AgriStability covers your perils all the way to the, till your product is sold. With given the current circumstances with geopolitical and all that kind of stuff, it's not just the risk that you're trying to cover that's on the field, but also what happens after you've taken the product off into your bins and all that.
Thank you very much. We'll go to the Liberals for 6 minutes. MP Mingarelli.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you to all the witnesses for being here today. Alors, je vais tourner mes questions.
I am going to ask you a question, Mr. Lefort. Many farmers in my riding are members of the Ontario Association. I'd like to first address the matter of business risk management. You talked about the trigger threshold to 85%. Why is the current level insufficient in practice?
Thank you very much for the question. It's a good question, and it is, I think, critical to the point, one of the main points we're making here. So we have heard from members over the years that essentially what has changed from the Agri Stability Program payment trigger, moving from 85% of historical reference margins to 70%, has essentially moved this from a program that, as it was intended in its name, to stabilize farm incomes, to more of a disaster level program. If your program margins are falling by 30%, you are in a financial emergency, essentially. And that is a fundamental shift of the program. And it really is no longer a stabilization of income. It is a emergency level program. We've heard from members since that program, that payment trigger has been changed. Once it was changed, year over year, we were hearing consistently members, farmers in Ontario and throughout Canada no longer knew when they were going to receive a payment. At the same time, that was also introduced at the same time as the reference margin limitation and other provisions. So it made it more complex. It made it less likely to get a payment, and it meant that payments were smaller when they received it. And that was the single fact. That change was really the single factor that drove a lot of producers in Ontario out of the program since that change has been implemented. Just to recap, because producers no longer felt confident they would get a payment. They didn't understand how the payments worked, and the payments they received were much smaller than they'd expected.
Merci beaucoup. Par ailleurs, concernant Agri-Invest,
Thank you. Moreover, as for Agri-Invest, you said that you should make it entirely free of taxes. What are the current tax rules, and what are the obstacles they create for farmers?
Thank you. So essentially, when a producer deposits into Agri-Invest and there's the government match into the account, there's kind of two separate funds within the account for each producer. And the current rules are that they must withdraw the government match before they withdraw their own contributions, and that triggers a tax liability. That is something we've heard from members directly, that they are hesitant to do that, to create a new tax liability, and has contributed to many members leaving funds into the program when they would like to take it out to invest proactively in their operation to either increase efficiency, reduce risks that they face, or in a situation where they're in a difficult financial situation. By reducing that barrier of the tax liability that's created when withdrawing from the account, it just removes another obstacle for producers to access those funds and be much more proactive in managing their risks and increasing their efficiency of their operations.
merci. Et pouvez-vous donner des...
Thank you. And can you give a few real-life examples where the lack of flexibility for Agri-Invest had serious impacts on the farm?
So the really what we see is more at the macro level, which is that the funds within the Agri-Invest account have been growing over the years and not accessed. Really, it is more of a macro level issue rather than specific events. But really what it then was happening is the intention of that fund was to invest in the operation, and partly due to not the only reason, but one of the reasons being that creates a tax liability. Farmers are more likely to keep the funds sitting on the sidelines when they would like to be investing in new machinery or investing in new ways to mitigate from climate change risk or other risks that they may face. The more barriers and the more frictions we can remove from a program like that, the faster the money moves. Farmers invest tremendously into their business every year. It's a very capital-intensive business and input cost-intensive business. And any friction we can remove to make it easier for farmers to reinvest into their business is going to help the farmer at the individual level. But we know, given the size and scope and the interconnected of the industry, it will help Canada and Ontario economically as well, the easier we make it for farmers to invest.
Merci beaucoup. Mr. Chair, how much time do I have left? Okay, alors je vais demander une
Okay, another question in that case. In what way would tax-free withdrawals allow farmers to deal quicker with shocks, such as input price increases or extreme weather events?
Super fast.
Super fast. The idea would be you have, say, $20,000 sitting in your ag or invest account. You're not sure what your tax liability is going to be. All else being equal, if I know I'm not going to pay taxes by pulling that $20,000 out right away, I'm much more likely to take the money quickly and invest it to mitigate those risks and costs that I'm facing.
Thank you. Thank you. Next, we'll go to the block for 6 minutes. Mr. Lemire.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is for Ms. Delisle first. Thank you very much for joining us today and having accepted my invitation. Because for me, rarely has a study like the one on Agriclimat marked me so much. In my region, Abitibi-Témiscamingue, I was at the UPA, and when that study came about, it was a significant shock. What it says essentially is that Abitibi-Témiscamingue, a northern region, was going to have a climate similar to that of the northeast of the U.S. or the Montérégie region. Of course, there are more pessimistic and more optimistic views on this, but for over the last 10 years, no decisions have been made at a government level to slow down those targets. And so in 2050, we would have a climate that's very different in my region. My first question is quite simple. Do you feel that winter is threatened in Quebec and in Canada?
Oui, mais
Yes, but I must say I'm not a meteorologist. I'm not a specialist in that area. And as you know, Mr. Lemire, we had the opportunity to work closely with Uranos. And strangely enough, the benefits from snow cover will be reduced in time. And this will have an effect on forage production, among other things. And of course, you can see how things are evolving. We are seeing frequent changes, and this makes things very difficult for animal production. Because winter plays an important role, and snow has an insulating ability, and this is important for, pulses and so on. What impact could this have on us? For 2 or 3 years in the west area of my region, there was a perfect storm, as we call it, but there was the freezing conditions in the winter, but mind you, without that snow coverage, and that really has an effect on crops. Can you talk to me about the solutions that you're putting in place to help our farms be more resilient? Well, I would say that one of the things I mentioned in my speech is that the development of a concrete tool, one that's very well developed with and for farmers, with researchers. It's quite unique in Quebec and perhaps in the world. This type of tool does not exist. We developed it thanks to funding from the Quebec and federal governments. It is one of the tools that is the most efficient. Most farmers who make their climate plans and really observe the historical figures, and they look to the future as well for forecasts. They consult experts, and they're able to reduce the main risks and define strategies and adaptation measures for their business, which is usually quite unique from their neighbors. Those who go through this process, in 2 years, 55% of the measures targeted were adopted. A certain percentage have been delayed or revised, and some of them have been withdrawn. So we're carrying out studies to see what the impact is of this tool for the farmer. So I think these are important potential solutions to work upstream and to bring down those risks. There are some risks that can be addressed and other ones can't, such as extreme weather events. You've been through that in your region, heat waves, droughts, and so on. We can't adapt to everything. Sometimes these situations are quite extreme. Well, that leads to my next question. Over the past years, farmers have been dealing with major shocks, natural disasters, geopolitical risks. BRM programs don't help them with shocks when they happen, and there's not a lot of ability to look forward. How, if we want in fact, how can we trust farmers more so who are on the ground and who are dealing with these real losses? And how can we help them at the time that it helps them? How can we compensate for those losses? How can you support them in this? And what observations have you made around the efficiency of our programs? Well, as I mentioned, I personally don't want to speak to the efficiency of the programs, but what we are observing when we speak with farmers is the importance of having flexibility to be innovative. Some programs are rigid and don't allow for innovation, or they're not adapted yet to the new planting seasons. So these aren't, they aren't major changes that are required to adjust these programs so that they be better aligned with the current reality. And this is because the environment is evolving, and this applies to Quebec. And the farther north you go, the more the climate changes. So yes, these programs do have to adapt to these changes that are happening more and more often and quicker. Often farmers have support, and when they have advisors who are trained, even at university, the programs need to be changed so that the agronomists who are helping the farmers are better trained and have a better understanding of the different projects that are there. I think that's very inspiring for all of Canada, and I think we should look to them as a source of inspiration for, to better adapt our programs. I'll take the last 10 seconds to really underline what you've just said. The production dates, the planting seasons have changed, and the programs have not adopted. And the problem in the west of our region, on the 1st of May, there was rainfall, and that caused a huge problem. Thank you so much.
To the Conservatives for 5 minutes. Okay, go ahead, Mr. Gourde.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Merci.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, all the witnesses, for being here. My first question is for Ms. Delisle. You spoke about climate change in the northern regions like Abitibi-Témiscamingue, and thermal units have increased, and that changes the types of seeds that we can use and the type of forage and grains. And of course, research is required. And unfortunately, the government has cut funds to research centers that could have helped the more northern regions. Do you have anything to add to that? Well, I'm probably in the same position as you. Without research or tests or on-farm testing, we can't adapt fast enough. New knowledge is required. We need to know about, forage species, among other things. There are a number of tests that have not been conducted yet. There need to be a number of tests done on farm. We have some programs that will be ending soon. For example, the Living Laboratories program, and their job was to test things like these, like emissions, effect on the farm, and so on. Without research, we can't know. Your organization has worked very closely with researchers on the subjects that you just broached. Are there, studies or research that could maybe delay the current issues that we're talking about? Well, for new results, the 2 living laboratories that we talked about, that we're very lucky to have 2 in Quebec, that is the beginning of something. But without a follow-up, I think we're losing out on a big opportunity in Quebec and Canada, an opportunity to be proactive and to be responsible with our land use. And we're a northern country. There are other opportunities and threats as well. But if we don't adapt and we don't have research, farmers won't be able to keep up either. Thank you, Ms. Delisle. My next question is for Mr. Lefort. Currently, we are carrying out a study on BRM in the agricultural sector. Now, there's an attempt to improve programs so that they be updated. They were put in place about 25 years ago, and you'd like to update them now. But I think this is a pitfall because agriculture is evolving quite quickly, and we have to try to adapt these programs for the next 10 to 15 years because if we change them, well, we probably won't revisit them for another 15, 20, 25 years. So we have to update them for 2026, but we'll already be behind. Perhaps we need to adapt them for 2035. What would you say to that?
Well, certainly you are very correct and it is something I touched on my statements as well, but the evolving risks that the sector faces. I think the industry is always open for improvements to the programs in whatever form they take. You hear a lot of emphasis today on agri-stability, I think, because it can catch many different types of risks. It's the only risk management program we have that can trigger a payment for just about any reason, whether it be spiking input costs, commodity prices dropping, a weather event. Other programs, look at agri-insurance or production insurance, as many Ontario producers refer to it, that will cover very specific impacts to your yields if you're producing an eligible commodity. You look at Agri-Invest, that's a relatively small pot of money to make specific investments and mitigate risk. But if we look at a program that can potentially catch different types of risks, even ones that we haven't even foreseen that we'll be facing yet, we need that whole farm margin coverage to capture risk no matter where it's coming from. And that's why we emphasize an increase return to the 85% payment trigger. It's why we applaud the recent changes to remove the reference margin limitation, increases in compensation made under the program. I think there can be more to increase advance payments in the program to ensure they're more timely. But this is a key program that needs reinvestment because it can capture those risks that we haven't anticipated yet.
Monsieur Lefort, les programmes.
Mr. Lefort, the BRM programs have been adapted for farms with a well-established, profit margins and business revenues. There are very large-scale farms that can't apply because the amounts are too small. And then there are new farms, the next generation, that are just getting started, but they don't have a track record, so they have a hard time with the programs as well. And everybody knows that.
Maybe in the next round, MP Chatel, 5 minutes. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have two questions, one for Ms. Delisle and one for Mr. Lefort. And if I have time, I will share my time with Mr. McDonald. First question, Ms. Delisle, you spoke about planning ahead or preventing. In the next strategic plan, you're not the first witness to tell us that, yes, we need to protect the farmers and help them when they experience these shocks, but we also have to prevent. So how do you plan to work on programs that will encourage, on-farm adaptation measures? Earlier, we spoke about research, so I won't repeat that. Clearly, research is needed, not just in laboratory, but also applied research on-farm. A number of projects in Quebec do allow things to get started, but it's a very small number of farmers who have the chance to participate in such things, to really practice or to really test those practices. Then, Agri-Solutions is the project in Quebec funded by the government. So a portion of that risk needs to be assumed for the trying out of this innovation. Sometimes that's what's required to get good at a new practice. These programs are critical. Otherwise, the risks will fall back on the farmers again. And then they could suffer by, having to deal with losses, and they'll have to change their crops and all that without support. So we focus a lot on knowledge. So yes, research, but also farmers' knowledge and the transfer of knowledge between advisors, researchers, and farmers, and then financial support for the adaptation of these practices. So we have to work upstream. Excellent. Thank you very much. Mr. Lefort, you were speaking, and you're not the only witness who has told us that this sector, the agri-food sector, needs to be discussed and supported in the next policy framework. The current one is based on primary agriculture. How do you see the programs applying to the sector? We want to avoid red tape. And one of the measures announced in the federal budget last year was an investment credit to modernize our processing plants, and that's for equipment and for the buildings themselves. I prefer tax credits because there's less paperwork. It means you don't have to administer a program. You go see your accountant and you say, do I qualify? Yes, great. As part of the policy framework, how do you make sure that the provinces and the federal government can support the agri-food sector?
So certainly there is the core program we have through the MPF itself, and that has the other strategic initiative programs as well as the core risk management programs which we're discussing here today. Part of my testimony earlier touched on given the significance of the agri-food sector as a whole, we do feel there needs to be an increased emphasis on it beyond first further reinvestments to those programs within the MPF, but also that whole government approach. And you mentioned things like I believe you're referring to the super deduction tax piece for capital deduction which would apply, and we were very happy to see it would apply to food manufacturers when they're building a new factory. And we are also encouraged to see a reintroduction to the accelerated deductions across the board. That's an area, as you mentioned, where we feel a whole government approach makes sense, and that can be expanded even beyond the processing and manufacturing sector to primary agriculture as well. Farming is an incredibly capital-intensive business. If that same super deduction rules were to apply to farm buildings and particularly farm machinery, where the majority of farm capital expenses is in farm machinery, that would make a tremendous difference in farmers' confidence to invest. And I'll quickly say another piece that I hinted at was in our Farm Business Confidence Survey we run each year to our membership. We do see a decline in confidence and investment in those capital purchases over the past few years, given all of the uncertainties. Those types of tax policies can be very, it can help regalvanize that confidence in farmers to make $100,000, $1 million investments in machinery.
Okay, I'm going to have to stop you there. Thank you so much, Mr. Lemaire, for 2.5 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Madame Delisle.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Delisle, in Quebec, farmers have access to your services thanks to a grant. Can Canada contribute more significantly? I'm asking you the question because your expertise is very relevant for material changes, for things that can be implemented now. What do you think about are you satisfied with the federal contribution, and how can it be better adapted so that it can be used on the ground so that farms in Quebec and Canada can take better advantage of your expertise too? Thank you for the question. I think we've been lucky in the last few years, and it's important to remember that there are 2 living laboratories in Quebec, and the Agri-Solutions Climat program is in Quebec as well. But we don't know the future of these. The end of living laboratories has already been announced, and for the other one, we don't know. I get the impression that the expertise we've developed could be bolstered. We're talking 500,000 farms that participate in a research program. About 15,000 in Quebec should have that knowledge. The specific expertise, the agronomic expertise we have could very easily be adapted to the rest of Canada if there was a way to do so. It would save a lot of time and a lot of money for provinces, I think. A number of the federal programs are targeting an improvement to bring down greenhouse gases, but a lot of these programs won't be renewed or their funding will be reduced. We spoke about it a lot here. We talked about cuts for research and development. Do you think that these decisions are prudent on the part of the federal government? We're seeing major investments in the petrochemical industries and in pipelines. That will have impacts, of course, on farming production. Do you feel that we're going in the right direction? Well, I would even see that farmers themselves are asking the question. It's in their interest to bring down their own impact as much as possible because they are suffering the impacts of climate change. And so farmers can bring down their emissions. It's documented, and we know that most farmers with whom we work, sometimes, just with a climate plan, can allow them to bring down their emissions by 10%, but with having knowledge and expertise, they can do that. But if we want to go to the next level and bring them down by more than 20%, most of the time it would require support, which costs money, or research, or major changes within the company itself, including investments. Thank you very, very much.
Minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll return to Mr. Laforte, please. Your comments, you stated that over time, the agri-stability program has morphed from a stabilization program over to far more of a disaster program, and we've seen the participation rates fall because of that. Three factors I think we've heard witnesses across the study identify. One is if growers are diversified at the farm level, i.e. if they're self-insuring, they don't see as much value. You've mentioned in your testimony the coverage levels as well, with them dropping, which again has added to that morphing, and also timeliness. Wondering if you could comment. I know there's been U.S. programs that have developed actuarially sound formulas for pro-rating, discounting, whatever you want to use for program premium rates, basis farm level diversification. Are you aware of any of that, and do you think that that could be incorporated to drive increased participation rates in agri-stability if there was some sort of recognition for on-farm diversification for program participants?
Thank you. Excellent question. It is something we've looked at. So I'll say what we have looked at OFA. We have not. I'm not quite sure the specific study for the U.S., but there are ways the agri-stability program could be amended without requiring a major overhaul of the program to recognize the diversified farms. And you are right to mention it is an issue. We have heard from our members. Ontario has some of the most diversified farm operations throughout the country. I mean, Ontario agriculture, not only from the macro level of we have an extremely diversified split of livestock, crop production, specialized greenhouses. Like it is extremely diversified at the macro level, but even on the individual farm level, we do have producers who have multiple commodities. And as you rightly mentioned, when you are in that situation, it can blunt the impact or the possibility of a payment through agri-stability compared to a more specialized farm who may have 1,000 acres growing corn. Much more likely, possibly, if the price of corn drops, to trigger a payment in that situation than if you have some crop and some livestock and some other different commodities where they may offset each other. We have looked at this and have put forward a position that in the past that the agri-stability program can be amended to recognize those diversified operations and treat each commodity grown by an operation kind of as its own separate payment, if you will, under the program. So that if you're growing 3 different commodities and one commodity would have made it triggered a payment, but the other 2 would not, you still could get a smaller payment when looking just at that specific commodity that would have triggered it, compared to a situation now where the other 2 may offset it and you're very unlikely to get a payment. So the short, to sum that all up, is we have looked at this. There are ways we can amend the program, and we would very much like to see that idea pursued as we move to the next policy framework.
As a follow-up question, given that we've got over 20 years already that we've collected as margin data for the vast majority of the farms that are in existence, obviously we need to create something for new farms, new entrants. Would that also, you would think, would be enough data to actually create and have an actuarially sound basis for making some of those differentiations by enterprise or by commodity, as you would say? And let me add one other layer to that. You've advocated for 85% coverage levels. Some larger, more sufficient or established farms might not need quite the 85% if there was a discounted premium. In relation, would that 20 years of data be enough to actuarially sound and create a matrix of premiums that take into account both diversification and individually produced, individually selected producer coverage levels?
Yes, I do believe we have enough data to pursue this. Again, always the devil's in the details as we get to the final straws of such a program amendment, but I do believe that we do.
Thank you. Question to MNP. Would you support simplification of the Ag Stability Program, incorporating that matrix of premiums?
There's definitely ways to simplify the program and ways to streamline getting money to producers quicker. We'd definitely be in support of anything to make it simple. With the understanding, though, that there is a basic level of information needed to file for any application, any program in this country, which probably likely would not change.
As a quick follow-up, exactly on tax filing, because you're also a tax accounting firm, it's been alleged that there could be improvements made, particularly the corporate farm filing, that would categorize revenue streams more specifically, which actually would add to the timeliness of program response, particularly for ag stability. Would you agree?
I apologize. We're going to go to the Liberals now for the last 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the witnesses for being here. To MNP, you mentioned in your opening statement about needing better communication and I think better education for the producers who would like to access these programs. Would you like to further elaborate on what that might look like?
Yeah, we're a big believer that there's a gap in financial fluency among producers in this country, where we see producers who actually take an interest in understanding basic business risk management, basic business fundamentals. They're actually stronger producers, more business sound, and they actually reduce reliance on the programs because they address risk before the year starts. They'll sit down, like some of the other witnesses that have testified. They'll look at ways to mitigate any risk that's coming at them, whether it's price, whether it's climate. They'll use programs that look at those risks and actually reduces reliance on the programs.
Thank you for that. So at this table, we have a lot of farmers, not a lot of farmers, but a few, but varying different sizes here. So I'm a small farmer, and we have like some pretty big landowners over there. So I'd like to ask, and I don't know if we touched on this we've had a lot of witnesses and we've had a lot of questions around like, how can we do this better? And we've heard the same thing over and over again of how the programs need to be adjusted. Do you believe, to like the OFA and MNP, do you believe the programs and how they're designed currently are equitable to small, medium, and our larger producers?
Yes, we do believe that. Actually, the current programs, the way they are designed, they're very equitable. Doesn't matter. I mean, the basis of the programs is your farm a viable farm or your profitable farm? It covers that, not if you're sized small or large or whatever. It responds accordingly. So the current programs are designed in such a manner that they would protect the viability of the farm. If you're not a viable farm to begin with, then it doesn't protect, which is the beauty of these programs, because it does not mask the market signals. It does not keep you profitable when you're not a profitable a business, but it looks at any size, any profitable business and protects them accordingly.
Thank you. And to the OFA, same question.
So I would say, speaking as an economist, yes, and I would agree with what MNP has said as well, but there's also perception at the farm level as well. And anything we can do to increase the simplicity of applying for the program, so that one thing we hear from members is that to even participate in the program, they needed to hire an accountant or hire an advisor because navigating the paperwork was often complex, particularly when we had issues like the reference margin limitation within the agri-stability program. So anything we can do to increase simplicity of the program will make it more equitable for smaller farms who may not have the resources to hire advisors to help them through the program.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. How much time do I have? 2 minutes. I actually want Mr. Epp, if possible, give my time to him. I'd like him to finish that question. I don't know why that's not. Is that surprising?
That's very, very kind of you, Mr. Epp. You've got 1 minute and 57 seconds.
Yes, I'll continue with MNP. On the simplification aspects, what ideas would you have to simplify the program, yet also address the diversification issues at the farm level? Mr. LaForte just mentioned the reference margin limitations. There's also the whole structural adjustment mechanism, which is sometimes hard to understand. Any specific ideas that you would put forward to the committee?
There's a few. So one on things like, say, the structural change. It's not publicized like how that's calculated. So I think there's more communication and more transparency on where these numbers come from, and give producers the ability to look at doing their own calculations on some of these. The second one you talked about is in Canada, there's approved tax filers. So if we file a tax return, CRA receives it, they administer the refund. I think agri-stability could go through a program where if there's approved filers in the country, information is filed, proper information is filed, you should be able to issue the payment immediately to producers instead of having a process where it goes through administration levels to double check. So I think there's ways to get money faster to producers that way. AJ, is there anything you want to add to that?
I would add, so there's a project that's was put forward by Farm Management Canada, how to file, simplified filing through CRA, so that would be something we'd be supportive of. You can look at, so there's a lot of efficiencies that you can look at through the current process that are in place to streamline and to cut costs both to the farmers and to the administrators. One of the key examples would be is most farmers right now, we've kind of gone away from the legacy farming where there wasn't a lot of loans and stuff that, it was kind of family run, handed down. And now most farmers have loans against their farms. And all financial institutes require you to get accrual financial statements. If there was a mechanism that farmers could keep their cash filing as is, but they can submit their accrual financial statements, that would simplify things for intake and for processors.
Thank you very much. I'd like to thank our witnesses, both online and in person, for being here. We will suspend now for 5 minutes, and we will come back in camera. you.